can wave. Hey everybody, we're just getting started here at the station. So this is Linda Sartor. Linda, you want to say hi?
Hi, but I'm still hearing music.
I know, because you were not on the air yet. We're just on
Oh,
video.
okay.
Yeah. You're blue. You're green. One, three. Okay. All right. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Welcome everybody to the Nonviolence Report. You're at KPCA and we're at KPCA Petaluma, California 103.3 FM. I'm your host of the Nonviolence Report, Stephanie Van Hook, and I'm here in the studio with Michael Nagler and Linda Sartor. And on the Nonviolence Report, we like to explore some of the nonviolence in the news that's happening all over our planet, and as much as possible get folks here in the studio with us or on the phone who have experienced some part of the action of this nonviolence action taking place all over. And we're lucky to have in the studio today Linda Sartor. She's the author of Turning Fear into Power, and she is a nonviolence activist, I'd say, an actor for justice in our world today, and she's also local to the area. So it's a great honor to have our friend Linda Sartor back in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
And you're here because you were a first interview on our show a year ago, maybe. But what was the reason we're bringing you back today? Is because you've recently been to the U.S.-Mexico border with the Meta Peace Team. So tell us a little bit about what that is and your experience, and we'll just dive into what you saw and help process what's going on.
So Meta Peace Team is different than the Meta Center for Nonviolence.
Thank you.
Yeah, the spelling of Meta Peace Team is META, just one single T, whereas the Meta Center for Nonviolence is two T's. And the location of the Meta Peace Team office is in Michigan, and they do both domestic peace teams as well as international peace teams. I've been involved with them in Israel-Palestine in June, July this last year, and then also down to the border. They're going to be part of our work there this time was actually more relationship building. They'd already done one trip and started building relationships to find the niche for the work that we do, which is unarmed civilian peacekeeping, essentially. And what that means is people, citizens, sometimes from various countries, sometimes all of us were from the U.S., who are trained in unarmed civilian peacekeeping, which is or third-party nonviolent intervention. And it's just a way of being present in a place where there's potential for violence. Being present in such a way that it's less likely that there will be fear, and thus less likely that there's violence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what our work is, and we were down there partnering. We usually partner with an organization in the areas where we go. This time we partnered with Otro Lado, and they've been doing good work down there for several years now, providing consultation for those who are seeking asylum. And this is the busiest border in the world. So there's many people seeking asylum. I went down because of, what brought my attention to the need right now, or currently, was the recent arrival of caravans from Central America. And so those people actually, after after experiencing difficult enough conditions in their own country, that they decide to leave their homes. And I don't know if I can even imagine how difficult a decision that is. But I know that it's a big deal for somebody to choose to leave their homes because of the danger. And then they faced further dangerous conditions as they journeyed north. And then they arrive at the border, and continue to face dangerous conditions. So part of our work there was actually providing somewhat of a protective presence at the door of the building where the people would come to get their consultation.
Right. So you're protecting them from violence from the American government, from
That's
from
right.
service
Both
people and the
the
government.
American government. Well, no. Well, the violence can be not just from the government, but also from gangs. That the same sort of violence that they were escaping can follow them up there. And there's also human trafficking happening right there. So these people are very vulnerable.
So I guess I want to understand that a little better, because that's not something that I necessarily asked when I'm hearing the events in the news. So it's not just our government officials who are or the people that are being hired by our government officials to do this work at the border that are inflicting violence and dehumanization on folks seeking asylum and seeking to go through process of immigration. But as you're saying, there's gangs on the border. Can you say more about that? I don't.
Well, what you brought up has me thinking I need to talk about a couple of different things. I didn't see. I wouldn't recognize gang violence. I mean, there was nothing like that we were encountering. That is something that people are vulnerable to while they're there. And the building that the organization that we were supporting is in needs to be careful about who comes through the door. As far as our governments and in collaboration with the Mexican government's violence, that I didn't get to see either, because it's more the process, it's more the system. I mean, the violence of a double wall is one bit of violence. I mean, there's just, it's hard for me to keep my thoughts focused, but so these people, when they get there, they have to get a number. Even this is an illegal system, but because they have to wait for their number to come up before they're able to get across the border to even start the process of looking for asylum. And the numbers are given out every morning, like at 7 o'clock in the morning. So people who have just arrived at the border that are seeking asylum first have to get in line early in the morning to get a number. And then that number is good for maybe about 10 people, all have the same number. And then they wait maybe 6 weeks in very difficult conditions. The migrant camps are overfull, so they don't even have room in many of the migrant camps. They're dangerous and they're atrocious. We didn't even go to a migrant camp, but they could be like 3 hours away from the border. So they get their number. They have to show up the day their number is called, but they don't get to know when that's going to be. So any one day, 0 to 100 people might get let through the border. So they have to start showing up. They have to take that 3-hour journey with all of their things and their family members for several mornings before they actually, before their number's called. They have to be there to hear their number, and they have to be there to hear their names called. If they miss that, then they have to start all over again through that process. Once they get through, then this is where the violence, where more violence takes place than I can imagine. The families get separated. Men, women, and children over the age of 3 are separated from their parents for about 2 weeks. They're put into detention spaces that are freezing cold for those 2 weeks, and all their possessions are taken except for their first layer. I remember this. I was only in for 10 hours in Las Vegas when I was protesting nuclear or protesting drones at Creech Air Force Base. I was miserable because I was down to, I knew that the one layer was important and I wore a wool sweater on the first layer. And still I was freezing for 10 hours. They're there for 2 weeks. Children, 3 years old, separated from their parents. Parents were writing their family names on their children's arms so that they, in hopes they would find them when they come out. So that's a bit of the violence that is occurring down there. Now, as far as our work, a lot of the work of unarmed civilian peacekeeping is just being present. It's not active work. And that's part of what we have to learn as unarmed civilian peacekeepers is to be fully present in situations and not necessarily know that we're accomplishing anything, because we're just there in case some violence shows up. Then we try to do what we can to witness or to get in the way of it.
Linda, many years ago at Santa Cruz, we had a meeting. This is before Nonviolent Peace Force even got officially started. Mubarak Awad was at that meeting, the one who started the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence. And we asked him, do you want us there? And he said, yes, we want you to come. We are willing to die, but we do not want to die alone. And we don't want you to tell us what to do. We just want you to be there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really important part of unarmed civilian peacekeeping is we're there to serve the people. We're there to do what they want us to do. We're not there to teach anybody how to be nonviolent or, to place our own values on how they're doing what they're doing.
So it seems to me that it's quite powerful, Linda Sartor, to hear your experience instead of maybe directing this interview of trying to ask certain questions. It'd be interesting more to hear you tell us about, you wake up in the morning and what do you do? Like take us through your days there or your memories if you can, because it's like we get to absorb what you witnessed through your storytelling of it.
Yeah, so I was only there for a week. The organization Otro Lado requires people to go through an orientation, and they do that on Fridays and Sundays, and then they hope people will stay for at least a week. So we were mostly with them, but not completely with them. But they would start the day with the number of us going to the border at 7 to witness both the people lining up to get their numbers and also the calling of the names of the people who've been waiting for their numbers to come up. And then they'll do a morning orientation or a morning, gathering at the facility, and people get their roles for the day, and they actually do centering activity. They've realized how important that is for the work, this kind of work. And then sometimes we would just go off for a couple hours, and where we were staying was in a half-hour drive away from where we were working, so we would just hang out like in a cafe or something until it was time for us to start our work for the day with them. Some days we would take off and we went. One of the women on our trip had already made connections, and one man who was a deported vet showed us around. So we got to explore like different parts of the wall to see where what it looked like, and what was happening in those places, and we got to know. I think they're called border angels, and they're the ones who, on both sides of the border, will provide water and stuff to the places where people might be passing through.
Linda, can I ask you a question about that story? That when you're passing through the wall and you're seeing the wall, can you describe what you're seeing to us?
Yeah, I was surprised. I hadn't really studied what the wall looked like before I got there, and it's in progress, but it's not just a wall, it's really two walls. and this is one of the other violences that I see in that. Um, so, so another story is we met the deported vets, and I was appalled to realize that people who have served our country are not allowed back into their homes. These are people from Vietnam, from Iraq, from Afghanistan wars, who served our countries, thought they were citizens, even had some paperwork that talked about them as citizens, but hadn't gone through the legal process completely, and never officially got their citizenship. So they do something like they get caught for possession of marijuana, something like to take care of their PTSD, which our vet administration doesn't take care of very well. And they get caught and they get deported. There was some law in 1996 that allowed this to start happening. So now why I'm thinking about the wall, the two walls, in terms of these people, is the wall is slatted, so you can have communication on both sides of the wall. People could actually touch each other and connect with each other through the wall, even though they can't get to each other through the wall when there was just one wall there. But now that there's two, these people who are separated from their homes and never to return, if their family members are still in the U.S., they can't even have contact with their family members through the wall.
So you're seeing two walls, and I remember our friend Mary Hannah from Meta Peace Team, when she was there with you, she was saying on social media, does this make you feel safer? Like, what's the point of this? Is it to make us safe, or is it to be cruel?
Right, right.
And is that what you felt? Did you?
Yeah, Mary Hannah was actually on this team with us. Yeah. Go ahead. Say your question.
Well, is that what you felt? Did you feel that these weren't measures to make us safer, but to express cruelty?
Of course, yes. It's like, to me, that whole violent process of what they put asylum seekers through is just to discourage people from even trying to go through the process. Discourage people from even showing up. But yeah, it's nothing to do with our safety. It's all to do with deterrence.
And these are, I want to know more about the walls, because we've opened to Israel-Palestine as well, so we've seen the walls in Bethlehem, and so are these concrete walls, or you said they're metal slatted walls, or is it both, or what did you see?
It's slatted. I'm not sure what the material is. Slatted, and then they added height to what was originally there. There's also this one place that we visited where there's these little demonstration walls. They're like, there must have been some contest or something that Trump carried out where corporations were submitting their entries for prototypes of what the wall will be made of and how it will be constructed. Some of them were not slatted. They were all actually quite beautiful. People have painted like murals on the slats and messages on the slats in Spanish and English. There's a peace garden that's there that still, at least on the Tijuana side of the wall. And what did I answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine the wall in my mind as somebody who hasn't gone down to bear witness. Yes. Okay, Michael.
A couple of questions about organizations, Linda. Is Otro Lado a U.S.-based, a U.S.-based organization?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sure people could give an answer to that looking it up on their website. Yeah.
So my other question is to back up a little bit. I know that Meta Peace Teams started as a domestic intervention group, and they did some terrific work around, rioting in Ann Arbor and other places. But you got your start doing more cross-border international work with, like, Nonviolent Peace Force. And this seems to me to be sort of in between, that this is a domestic border with a foreign country.
Yeah, Meta Peace Teams considers it an international team because we spent our time in Tijuana. We had one day on San Diego's side doing a training, nonviolence training for people on the U.S. side, and we spent one day debriefing after we came out, but our team work was in Tijuana.
So now the big question that occurs to me is, are you or other members of this team planning to give talks and writing? The paradigm that I'm thinking of here is Peace Brigades International. When they would come back from Central America, they did reports about low-intensity conflict that really helped to change American attitudes and American policy. So it's become kind of standard procedure for people to go around and do lecture tours, like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So is there more of that being planned in any systematic way?
Yeah, well, a number of things have already happened back in Michigan. So there were 6 of us on the team, and 4 were from Michigan, and then I was from Northern California, and Kathleen was from Southern California. I haven't scheduled any. I didn't put together a PowerPoint presentation like I have in the past. I'm still available to do my Palestine PowerPoint, and in this case, I wrote an article for the Peace Press. That our local Peace and Justice Center puts out a journal called the Peace Press, and that'll be coming out into this month, I think. And I'm available to talk, but I don't have a slide presentation prepared currently to talk about this. I do expect to go back down there. It's a lot easier than some of the other international places that I've been. And so it's easier for me to get there. Yeah, and I may end up with more of a presentation, but thus far I've only been doing like talks with people informally about my experience there.
Well, to get back to the story itself, though, and thank you, Michael, for asking that important question, but that's also why we've brought Linda on the Nonviolence Report, too, is to help, definitely to help get the word out of what she saw, and that's the role of the Nonviolence Report and organizations like ourselves, is to know what's going on and get those people out, their voices out there, too, as a part of this larger, as we call, constructive program of battling the corporate media's narrative of what's happening and why. When we left off just a minute ago, Linda Sartor, you were describing a bit of the wall of what you were seeing on your days. So let's get back to that. What else did you see or do or hear that can help us to accompany you on that journey? So were you working directly with individuals who needed help getting across the border? Can you tell any stories for us?
You know, I don't have a lot of personal stories. For one thing, the stories of the people are really confidential. But the other is that I don't speak Spanish. It's really helpful for people who go there to speak Spanish, and you get a lot more of that. We had greeting people at the border. We tried to give them the information about what Otro Lado had to offer, and I was once in a while catching people who hadn't gotten to speak to anybody yet, and kind of bringing them to a Spanish speaker who could give them more information in their language.
Okay. So it's nice to know that even that is something that people can do that can be helpful.
Yeah, but not volunteer if you don't speak Spanish, because Otro Lado can use volunteers in many ways, and they had a really effective way of putting volunteers to work.
Like, how did they do that?
Well, they have an organizational development person who has volunteered to work with them, who had been working with them for a couple of months. He was in the process of transitioning out, but he was really good at, he was like the one that led the meetings in the morning and the trainings and the orientations. And they cook, they have somebody prepare lunch every day for those who are there that day. Giving other services. There's a medical clinic in the same building. And so the volunteers are supporting all those different processes. The most important volunteers probably are bilingual medical people and bilingual lawyers, bilingual immigration lawyers. Those are like the key volunteers, but there's a lot of, oh, and childcare is another one, you know, because people, they come with their families. They don't have any place to leave their families behind when they come, you know, so there's kids in the building, and so some people take over, you know, entertaining the kids while their parents are busy with the other stuff.
Okay, all right. That's all. It's, even though these seem like really basic questions trying to pull out of you, it's helping to us to understand more of the experience. And so now, you, with your work in third-party nonviolent intervention, besides the community violence that's taking place, the cultural violence that's taking place, did you witness, or were you part of any de-escalation efforts that were taking place, like directly? Or?
Okay, so there was a demonstration, and this was organized by the deported vets, the Deported Vets United, and Veterans for Peace, and collaboration with another organization. It was on the day that there was protests elsewhere also about Venezuela. And so this is the day that we actually did peace team work, where we accompanied the demonstration. And it was also a cleanup. So it was a number of different things that they had organized to do that day. And we were really there as a peace team to just witness, to be present. And so we were in partners. In our team, we were in partners. And my partner started talking with this man that was just, would have interrupted the demonstration, and she just kept talking with him. It wasn't so much that he was angry with what we were doing. He was just needing to spout, and so that was the one de-escalation. She got involved with doing that, and at one point I thought, well, we've kind of gotten apart from the rest of the group, and I didn't see what we were accomplishing. But when I said something about, let's go, she said, no, I want to stay. And then later she explained to me that she was just keeping him and bringing him down so that he wouldn't interrupt one of the parts of our group. And so she just stayed with him until the conversation was complete and he was calmed down and went on his way. But she actually felt that it might have even been protecting him, because he could have been somebody that would get arrested just for doing what he was doing.
That's really helpful for us to hear too, that all these different aspects of third-party nonviolent intervention. Michael, you had a burning question over there.
Well, actually, guess what? I have two questions. The more general one is, I know that there's a group called If Americans Knew that promotes information about, in this case, Palestine and what happens there, with the idea in mind of raising consciousness. And I wonder if there's a group similar to that. This is kind of like my earlier question about the talks and stuff. Is there anyone who's sort of systematically at this point trying to tell people what goes on at the border? I know our friend who's a representative from Seattle, Pramila Jayapal, has gone down there and done terrific work actually helping families get across. And of course she's in Congress, so she can speak where it really matters in that way. But is there anyone else that you know of who's trying to get this word out?
Not that I'm aware of, other than, I mean, just Meta-Peace team, it's part of the process of going down is to share what we've seen and learned.
So,
and I'm sure there's others that do that, but I don't know of any that are specifically focused on that.
So that leads me to my other question. We have a friend right now who's hoofing it down to the border, and he may have some stories for us when he gets back, if he gets back. But my question is, if someone wanted to help, would you, a U.S. person, Would you send them to Otro Lado or to Meta Peace Teams?
Either one would be good. It depends on what you want to do. So if you want to get involved with unarmed civilian peacekeeping type work, that's Meta Peace Team.
Yeah.
And then if you just want to volunteer to because there's a need down at the border, Otro Lado would be who I would. Meta Peace Team will be sending another team in May. Is their expectation, and maybe one in the summer as well.
And I think by the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think by the time you're through their training, you could go and do that kind of work elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Michael, for your burning questions. And
Thanks
it
for
seems
putting out the fires.
that's right, and it looks like you have a real interest in getting those stories told. So let's just hold on to that. And so good that you're here on the Nonviolence Report, helping us tell those stories. It's constructive program, Michael. I want to get back to Linda just to wrap up her interview a bit, because in a little bit we're going to be talking about New Zealand and the climate march and so forth. So I want to really focus on Linda for this last part. And again, I want to understand your experience at the border, Linda, and your work in nonviolence. And I was wondering, when I think of the cruelty that you must have seen in the community violence and the structural violence and the direct violence, did you have any moments of joy there too? Were there any moments that weren't filled with the heaviness or the sadness, or was that part of? Were there any moments of joy? I suppose is my simple question.
Well, there's joy in doing this work in general. I started doing this kind of work as of 9/11, after 9/11, when my heart was tormented by the way the U.S. responded, and I found that in doing this work, I got my life back in a big way. Because there's something about, like I expected, when I started doing this work, I expected trauma and prepared for that, and instead, when I first got back from Palestine, the first time that I went, I experienced that I was feeling more alive than I'd ever felt in my life. And I could only attribute that to the fact that all of our lives, we've been exposed to violence just because of television and because of what's always in the news. And never really feeling like there was anything, just feeling this is wrong, but never really feeling like there was anything I could do about it. And so when I've been able to find this work, I find it really fulfilling. I believe that the more each one of us learns to listen to our heart's calling and follow that as much as possible, the more likely we're going to experience joy in the work we're doing, even if the work doesn't seem to be joyful work. So there's that, and there's also the team. So there were 6 of us working together, and that's always a big piece of both the challenges and the joy that comes with the work. Unfortunately, it was really cold, and we stayed in a house that didn't have heat. And when I first heard that we were going to be in that situation, I thought, well, that's not a big deal. San Diego and Tijuana this time of the year, it's comfortable, but it wasn't. It was cold, very cold. So we never warmed up except for when we were in the sun on the street, when the sun did come out, or we'd go. We didn't warm up when we went home. We didn't have a way to warm up, so other than going to bed. So that was kind of the thing that, when you were asking about joy, that was the thing that showed up for me, was the discomfort of. But then again, some of the people on the team were just pointing out how this is the life of the families that we were there to support, and they don't get to leave like we get to leave after a week. So in that way, we were in solidarity with them.
Linda Sartor, thank you so much for joining us here on the Nonviolence Report. How would you like people to be in touch with you if they'd like to know more or have you present? Or
okay, so let me give you my email address. Linda at mononsville.org, and the way you spell Mononsville is M as in monkey, O, N as in Nancy, A, N as in Nancy, S as in school, Mononsville, .org.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda Sartor. And Michael, you're going to do our nonviolence news now, our nonviolence report after our interview with Linda, but I want to Facebook Live it, so I need you to stall for 2 minutes while I get that set up, okay? So you just tell us about what nonviolence is, and you can even review what you heard in Linda's interview. Give me 2 minutes, and you just talk away.
Welcome to the Dog and Pony Show.